and we were looking at the sheep, and they were in the same spot, and our guide was like, okay, I don't know if we can get to them fast enough. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a legal ram in there, but I don't know if we can get to them and get them shot and back to the airstrip in the same, like, I don't know if we can pull it off, but maybe. He said, so we either try that or we're in sheep country. We just like keep working our way up this main ridge and peeking over both sides and just hope that we find a sheep. And I told him, I was like, man, I don't really want to just know where some rams are and know that we can probably make it and then just sit here and hope that one pops up that we've never even seen. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I've had enough sleep this week for a couple of months. So, like, if you want to go for it, we'll go for it. And I was like, yeah, let's go.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com. You've been on every type of North American sheep hunt.
I have now, yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Just finished the 4th.
Special kind of slam?
Yeah. I guess I still don't have a slam. I still haven't filmed one.
Which one have you not filmed?
Dall.
Oh, gotcha. What is your favorite of the sheeps?
I like the adventure side of the Alaska because it was Dall sheep, you know?
Yeah.
And then, or not Dall, good Lord, it was backpack hunt.
Yeah.
So that was more adventurous. And then desert sheep is pretty fun though.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It just is.
I was kind of getting into the genetics the other day of desert and California. Seems like some real gray area stuff.
I haven't looked into it a ton.
Yeah. And then genetically, what's different between a stone and a Dall?
It's, I mean, a lot of it, people just say it's a line, but they're hair. They just have, like, their...
A little bit different hair color.
Yeah, a little bit different hair color. Like a stone's is more like, like stone gray. Stone gray and white. And they're getting harder to come by.
Aren't there some Dall sheep that kind of have some off-colored hair?
Like a fannin, yeah. Yeah, there are some that, and they're mixed in a lot of areas too. So somebody that wants like a true stones, it seems like you can get into some spots where it's maybe not. We were in the Yukon one time after stones, and the older of the rams was more white. Like, it still had some gray in it, but it was pretty white. Just a dirty white, like, pepper. And, but there was a younger ram that was definitely more of like a prominent stones. And the hunter, of course, wanted one that looked more like a prominent. And, but the guide was like, what are we doing? We need to shoot, we need to shoot an older sheep. And so we did.
Sheep are interesting to me in that regard with the age class thing because older sheep aren't breeding, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, they get to a certain point, which is like in that like above 8 years old, I think. I mean, it was 7 years old. They had to be 7 where we were. And frick, I hope that's right. I'm pretty sure it was. It's been long enough now.
If it's not right, it's close enough, and if somebody's mad about it, then they can look up the regulations.
Yeah. Yeah, so they needed to be a certain age, and is basically that's kind of when they like 8, 9 years old and above. They're just there, really, I mean, deteriorating.
Yeah.
Until they die.
Yeah. And that's I don't know, that's a real world conservation type thing, because you can shoot that age class of ram all the time, every year, and you're not going to affect the ability of the species to continue.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing. A lot of people talk about shooting elk that are, past their prime and not breeding. That's really kind of fake news. There are very few elk, it's way less than 1% of bulls that ever go past their ability to breed cows.
That's interesting.
I would say the same for deer.
Yeah.
Pretty uncommon for a buck to make it to a point that's beyond sexual maturity. But sheep, it's a little bit easier.
They get there. Yeah.
How was eating your sheep?
Super good.
Yeah?
Yeah, like the best. Probably the most tender. Like all of it. We had like a rear ham left. Just like a roast type thing. We just wrapped in a roast. And we cut it up into maybe 3 pieces. Like it was, fairly decent sized. And we cut it up in 3 pieces and threw it in a pan and cooked it basically just like we would a backstrap, and sliced it and ate it. And it was basically like a deer backstrap.
That's crazy.
The tenderness. You can see the grains in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was insane.
That's so crazy, because like an older domestic sheep is one of the more awful things you can eat.
That's kind of what I've heard, and I've had sheep before a little bit. Just mutton? Is that you call it? And I was just...
It's gross.
Yeah, I wasn't really a big fan. But it's definitely, it's just a dark red meat. Maybe I wouldn't even really say dark red, but...
So what I find especially interesting about your Dall sheep hunt this year is the combination of mental and physical toughness that you needed. And it's not normal for a hunt to require that level of toughness in both of those regards. So tell me the story of your Dall sheep hunt, kind of from the very, very beginning, wherever you would consider the beginning of that to be.
Yeah. So we got a spot in with an outfit on the south slope of the Brooks, and they had a spot for us like right at the beginning of the season. So it'd be August 10th was the opener. So I left Boise August 7th. We flew into Fairbanks and then took a charter the next morning into a little lake. There's an airstrip there at the lake, and then they had like a cabin set up, the outfitter did, and then we would super cub out from there. So the weather was nice, and it wasn't really supposed to be, but the weather was nice when we got to the lake on the 8th, so they chartered us out from there. And it doesn't really, there's like 4 hours in the middle of the night where it's like pretty dark. It's still like shooting light. You could do it, but it's pretty dark. So since the weather was good, even though we got in in the afternoon, like 3-4 o'clock, they chartered us out to where we were going to be. So we were on the ridge August 8th where we started, and we found there was like 2 or 3 rams, or at least sheep. They were a long ways away, but they're way up at the head of this little drainage. And then as we were sitting there talking, the wind had come up a little bit on that ridge, so the pilot just hung out for a while with us, which ends up being, he's the owner of the outfit as well. So when we were just hanging out waiting for the wind to go down, there were 4 sheep that rounded from one drainage. They crossed the saddle into the drainage we were looking at, and they were a long ways away, like 1.5 miles probably. And it was pretty warm. There was a lot of heat waves, so you couldn't see. I mean, you just couldn't see them really well. You know how it is looking at spotting scope a long ways away. But there was there was good mass like down here, and that'll come in later too. There was good mass like down at the bottom of his curl, so they're like, usually if there's a lot of mass there, like you can kind of imagine how it finishes out.
Yeah.
So they're like, those were 2 really good sheep. So instead of, we had originally planned, if I could like set the scene. So there's a big long ridge that you can imagine like is the main ridge in a range. So main ridge. And then there was a ridge off of that came down. I guess you could call it like a finger ridge.
Yep.
And it came down to a saddle, and then it went down a little bit more from the saddle. And we were like, imagine us at the bottom of that saddle, basically. So we'd seen him up this finger, and we had originally we were going to try to get to that saddle because we were trying to make it up all the way up the finger to the main big ridge so we could basically like hop peak to peak and have the most vantage point that we could. Just be in the highest area where you could glass the furthest. So that was our plan, and we wanted to get a quick move on that. But with the sheep that we had seen come into the drainage that was literally, right in front of us, we decided to just sit tight where we were for that evening and the next morning and just watch them, because there were 2 rams that were legal, that they were pretty sure were legal and needed at least a closer look. And so we didn't want to leave sheep to go find sheep. So we hung out the next morning, which would have been the morning of the 9th. And we watched those sheep like mill around, and we were really hoping that they were just going to mingle like up at the head of the drainage. And then we were going to put a plan together to go around them. But there was a long time that we weren't going to be able to see them. And it was a good thing that we didn't move, because they ended up just making like a beeline basically towards us, like across the side hilling the ridge, or the ridge, the slope, and came around and went all the way to that saddle and then went through it. So then they were on the next drainage over, and we couldn't see, like we didn't know where they were. So we packed up and decided to move closer. And our original plan was, it was really clear starting out that night.
So are we still on hunt day 1?
No, this is pre-hunt.
This is pre-hunt.
Yeah. This is like pre-season open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we're just kind of twiddling our thumbs, really just watching sheep, waiting for the 10th to open. So we didn't want to go right to the saddle and follow them through, because we didn't know where they were on the other side, didn't want to bump them and screw the whole thing up for opening morning. So we camped just shy of the saddle that night, and the original plan was to go, there was a kind of a peak that looked into the saddle that we were going to try to get to at midnight when the season opened, because it was like light enough to shoot.
How do they even deal with shooting light
there is
when you're
none.
that far north? Yeah.
There is none, from what I understand. Yeah. There is none.
If you can see, you can shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that was our original plan, and we actually made it probably a third of the way up that peak, and there were some clouds that moved in, and when those things moved in, it was like you couldn't see anything. And so we just turned around and went back down.
So how far do you think you could see?
It was like, it was pretty dark. I mean, if they were at 100 yards, you'd be okay.
Okay.
Maybe 200 yards.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't. Especially trying to decipher which one's legal.
Right.
And things, like it just wasn't good.
Was there wind with it?
No.
Okay.
No wind.
Just clouds.
Yep. Just clouds coming in. So we went back down, went to bed, woke up the next morning, clear skies. It was really nice. We took a little bit of time, packed up our camp, and went to the saddle. My guide saw 2 rams, and they were 2 small ones. So there was 2 small ones and 2 legal ones with them when we originally saw them. My guide saw 2 small rams headed to us, And so we dropped our packs and went and made a little bit of a stock, got on a pretty good like platform to shoot from. And the 2 small rams came out at 300 yards and bedded down. And bedded down for like, we were there for probably an hour. And then they stood up and they walked back through the saddle in the opposite direction. And the big ones never showed up. They just weren't there, I guess. I don't know. And a lot of that country is just so, it looks so big and like steep too. Like some of it's steep, but it's like pretty, the slopes are really like gradual rolly. It's really hard to see very far, you know?
Yeah.
And so
lots of places that something can hide, but it doesn't necessarily look like that. It feels like you should be able to see them.
Yeah. Like there's just a ton of folds. So we packed up and we started heading like up the finger to the big main ridge. And we got on top and glassed for a little bit and couldn't turn them up, and decided to camp there that night and just try to turn them up the next morning. So we set all our tents up and whatever, and when we woke up the next morning, the wind was like cranking. I don't know. There was probably some 60-mile-an-hour gusts is what our guide thought.
And were you in a Hilleberg or what kind of tent were you
I was in a Hilleberg, yeah. I was in a NEAC.
So a good tent for wind, but still it's just
it was
just getting buffeted.
Yeah, it was getting hammered. And it wasn't that windy for that long. Like we probably were going through like 20-30 minutes of it. And then our guide was about to tell us like we should probably drop off a little bit and try to find a better spot, and it lightened up a little bit, which was nice. But we just had a bunch of like fog coming in, and it was 0-0 like most of the day, and it was raining, and so we spent pretty much up until like 7-8 o'clock at night in our tents that day. And it started breaking up a little bit. It was still raining, but you could see at least. And so we got out and went up the ridge and glassed and couldn't see anything that night. And then all there is to do is we had weather coming back in. And all there is to do is just go back to bed, to the tent.
So meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm watching your guys' weather and thinking, oh, crap. Like it is coming through there. And, just, eating my fingernails, waiting to hear what's happening. And
yeah, it was rough.
I mean, the erosion on your mental state when you're on a hunt like that, like this is your shot. This is your shot at a sheep. It's a Dall sheep in a cool place, and you're backpacked in, like you're absolutely doing it. And suddenly there's a reality that you might be weathered out the entire time. Like, what does that do to your mental state? Yeah.
So there was that part of my deterioration didn't come until day 7, I think.
Day 7.
When we had a really bad, there was like some things there that happened in the middle that we'll cover, but it was like day 7 of being in it where we started to get down. We started to develop like exit strategies, how we were going to get back to the strip by, I'll just say Friday morning, because that was when we left. They were picking us up at 7, I think, in the morning. We're supposed to on, whichever day. I think that was the 19th of August. So it was Friday morning. And when we got down to like the last few days where we were starting to talk about when we were going to pull the plug and leave, because we were still, half a day away from the airstrip if you were like rocking. And that's when I started being like, oh, son of a bitch.
This might not happen.
Yeah, and then we just had really bad weather on top of it. We had like 70, 80 mile an hour winds. I talked to some other guys that they actually had to pull out during that deal. And they were just like, we've never been in a windstorm like that. And I thought my Hilleberg was going to be gone if I got out of it. I was pretty worried.
Hats off to the good folks at Hilleberg.
Seriously. Yeah. And the other guys were using tarp tents that the outfitters provided. And like they were working, but they were starting to, like it wouldn't have taken that much wind for a lot of time.
And like you can stake them down. Like there's a lot you can do to secure those things. But then you're putting this gargantuan amount of pressure on nylon or sil nylon or some kind of sil poly, and these little grommets, like, you just can't expect it to continue to hold up.
Then you're effed.
Yeah.
If something happens, like, there's 80-mile-an-hour winds and everything's socked in. Like, nobody's coming to get you.
Yeah.
And I asked our guide one time when it was getting pretty bad, I asked him, like, where would you even go if you had to walk out? Like, would you walk to a river, or where would you even go? And he's like, well, there's a little village, like, gosh, what did he say? I think 80 miles from where we were. There's a little village like 80 miles from us, and he's like, I'd rather crash there than land there. So,
dude.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's what he said. I'd rather crash there, I think he was what he said.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself though.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot. It's a lot of kind of the same story, but we do make some progression. So, all right, so that was the second day. We were in the tent for most of the day, and then that's just something that you figure is going to happen, like a couple days of weather. That's why those hunts are so long. So we wake up the next morning, and it's raining, and you're just going to sit in the tent all day. So we sat in the tent the entire day. That day there was like no breaking.
Are you in a tent by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody had their own tent.
How are you staying occupied? Like,
I had my phone, and I downloaded podcasts.
Okay.
Most of which I actually didn't download, thanks
Bummer.
to Spotify. Yeah. So I just had a bunch of old ones that I had downloaded previously, and so I just listened to those a lot.
So battery banks are something that you and I talked about after this hunt. And you think, I believe you told me that like a 20,000 milliamp hour battery bank is where it's at. That's what I'm carrying now.
Yeah.
I have a 10,000 dark energy that's really great too. It's good for like 2.5 cell phone charges. But the 20,000 seems to be kind of the ticket.
Seems to be better. Yeah. So I had 2 dark energies with me and then a solar panel.
Yeah.
And the solar panel sounded like a really good idea at first. And honestly, after this whole hunt and then talking to the guy during it, he's like, this is the worst weather that we've ever had on opening. He's like, this is the first year in a really long time that we haven't at least shot one sheep on the opener.
Wow.
And they didn't shoot any on the opener. So it was just like a really wild weather year and rough for everybody. So so I took those 2 10,000s and then that solar panel. And the solar panel really came in clutch later.
Okay.
But just recharging everything. But so
you're listening to podcasts?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then do you have like a InReach?
Burning InReach battery, yeah.
Okay.
For sure. And just talking back and forth to home. And so that day finally got through, and my poor camera guy, he didn't really know that InReaches existed.
Oh.
Yeah. And he's a very socialite kind of fella anyways.
Okay.
And did not like being by himself.
So he was like, putting a bloody handprint on a volleyball inside his...
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he was like, yeah. I don't think he loved it. I mean, I let him use my InReach, some of it, but sometimes when we were in the tent, like, we couldn't, so anyways, that'll probably come up later too. But so we were in the tent all day that day. The next morning we woke up and we're in the tent till probably like 9 or 10, and everything started breaking off. And it was pretty good. There wasn't really any rain, but we still had like clouds moving in and out, so it was still visibility wasn't great. But we packed up all of our stuff and headed up the Finger, and we were just glassing our way up, and when fog would come in, we'd just stop and hang out and BS, and then it would move through and clear up a little bit. And we finally made our way we got on the main ridge that split everything. And we glassed there for a little bit, and there was this big peak up to our left, and our guide was like, yeah, I want to get to the top of that. We can definitely glass off of it. I think there's enough places that we can all pitch our tents pretty flat, and it'll be nice. And then the next morning we'll be able to glass right off of it, and like we're in sheep country now, like really good sheep country. So I was like, all right. So we started making our way up to this big peak, and we got like a third of the way up, and I looked over, and there was like through a saddle there was a little tit, I would say, and around the bend of the tit comes I just saw 4 dots, and I was like, those are sheep probably. So we all got down, broke spotting scopes out, and one of them was super cool. The other 3 were just immature, but there was one legal ram for sure, and he was broomed off on one side, but on his other side he had full curl, and he was like really tipped out, and he had a big gouge taken out of the top of his horn, which is pretty cool. So it was getting towards dark, but we decided that we wanted to go make a stalk. Well, you still had to go up to the top of that peak and wrap around it and then go back down. And from where we were, the easiest way to get to the top, the sheep were going to be able to see us, and we were going to basically be like skyline to them. So we didn't want to chance it, so we had to roll over the back edge, which was basically like a small cliff, just like bunch of rock formations that just took forever to move through. And when we got to the top, we looked at where the rams were bedded, and they weren't there anymore, and we couldn't find them. But I was convinced that they were just wrapped around the hill a little bit, still bedded in the same spot. But we did think maybe they're below us, and we kind of passed each other. And so we went down off the edge as much as we could and looked, and just couldn't, like, we could see a lot of the mountain, but we couldn't see all of it. We're like, no, they're not under us, or at least we don't see them. Like, I think that they're still wrapped around that. And then just, I think all of us kind of feeling the pressure of just been sitting in a tent for like 2.5 days or whatever it was. I think we were all pretty anxious to try something.
Yeah, make a move.
Yeah, do something. And so we were like, all right, we're going to go over there. And we didn't make it probably 200 yards headed down towards the saddle. And I just looked over, and there's 4 sheep just like take off from underneath of us and go right back to where they came. And the 3 small ones stopped at like 420, and the big one was in the lead and didn't hesitate, just like kept going.
Were you
Never
able
gave me a shot
to even did you have your rifle out and you could have shot if you stopped? Yeah.
Yeah. So we dropped our packs at the top of that, at the top of the peak, and like we're going to go on the stalk. So I had my rifle out and ready. And if he would have stopped, like it would have been a quick shot, but I had time when they came out. I like ranged where I thought they could stop. I dialed and was like ready to shoot, and he just never stopped. So we just turned around and went back up, and by the time we got to the top, I think it was like 1 a.m. our time, and it had cleared off, and it was getting cold. There was like frost on our packs when we got up there, and it was just like fixing to be a cold, kind of miserable night. And the wind was blowing pretty good too. So we set up our tents, and it was supposed to be, via the inReach, it was supposed to be pretty nice. So we didn't really, I staked my tent down pretty good and tied it to some rocks, but I didn't like do it for a full on windstorm. And then the next morning is when we woke up and the wind was like ripping. It kept ripping the tent stake out of my vestibule, so I just tied it to my backpack. And then I was legitimately like, if I get out of this thing, like it's gonna be gone. And I looked over, and my camera guy's tent was like right next to me, and it has just one not a vertical pole, but it runs lengthwise.
Right.
And it was like over like this, and it was just like banging, and you could see the outline of his sleeping bag. It was just a person laying there, and I'm like, holy shit, man.
Just wet nylon slapping you in the face repeatedly. Yeah. Gross.
That's exactly what was happening. So, and it was all socked in, like couldn't see anything. So our guide's name was Wes, and I was like, do we have a plan? And he's like, I think we need to get off here before all of our shit starts breaking. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, probably a good idea. So Down off from where we were, there was, before you get to the next little creek bottom, there was like a flat spot that was like a little meadow almost looking thing. And so we knew it was there, and we had planned that if we had bad weather, that's where we would go, and there was water there and everything too. So we bailed off and just pretty much were just stuffing stuff in our pack, like wherever we could go, like just strapping things on as fast as we could, not packing very nicely. And we bailed off, and we ended up getting below the clouds. And so we just posted up below the clouds, and just stayed up there all day, and we're looking off of both ends. I brought a tarp. I brought the Kafari sheep tarp. It's just a little like 9x9 flat tarp. And we set it up, and there was all 4 of us were underneath of it, and just made coffee and ate snacks and glassed, and we saw a couple of rams that were immature off of that. And then we looked at the inReach weather, and there was supposed to be a bit of wind that night and some snow. So we decided to just go down to the meadow and set up camp. And the wind was still whipping pretty good the whole time. So we get down to the meadow, and we had just got there, and at one point had thought maybe we should keep dropping all the way off if it's supposed to be this bad and get down to the creek bottom. There'd be more cover. And there was a sow with 2 cubs down there and headed our direction. And I was like, well, our guide's like, I mean, there's really nowhere else to go. Like, we can't camp on a giant hillside, so.
Yeah, and staking tents down in Talos is almost impossible.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, do you stay on a shale hillside or go deal with a sow grizzly that's got cubs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we chose the latter. And we went down and got our tents pitched and got giant rocks on top of the stakes and built like kind of a fortress. And we were all picking out like dinner for the next day and shoveling snacks in between all of us, of like trading, like, all right, what do you want to eat all day tomorrow? Because we're gonna be in the tents all day. And we woke up, and I heard our guide out making coffee, and he's like, it's actually really nice this morning. I was like, oh, sweet. So we got up, and there was some snow on the peaks, but it was pretty good where we were. And we packed up our camp, and we went back up to where we had been sitting the glassing the night before below the clouds. And right as we got there, all the clouds moved in. And then we were socked in again. So we just sat there.
Disheartening. Most
of the day. Yeah, it was really when the wind was really bad the morning before. That was when I pulled inReach weather, and all the rest of the days had a snowflake on them.
Gross.
And I was like, we literally made it this far, and we're not even going to get a chance. Well, I mean, this blown stock the day before really hurt bad, but.
And even beyond, like, snow being bad for that kind of business, spotting white sheep in snow is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Because snow is also white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, but yeah.
Okay. So where are we at? Day 5?
Oh, man.
6? Probably blurs together.
We're getting close to Friday.
Yeah.
So we had that day of weather, and in the afternoon it started breaking, and it was getting nicer. So we decided to go back on top of the peak, and we glassed off of it that evening, if I remember right, and then we
How big of a climb is that?
Went to bed. Probably 1,500.
1,500 feet.
Yeah, 1,500 feet.
And fairly steep, I would guess.
Yeah, pretty steep. And then the rocks really suck. Like, they're all rocks the size of a dinner plate or steak plate and bigger. And they're not stable at all. They're always moving.
Were you happy with your boots?
No.
Uh-oh.
It was a bad boot choice. So I had...
That surprises me, because you're like...
I know.
Trust me. You're the boot expert.
Surprises me, too.
You're one of the only people that I ask about boots.
Well, I don't think that I really didn't think they were going to fall apart, and they really didn't fall apart, but they were on their way to.
Really?
Yeah,
in just a few days.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the end where I was like, holy shit, I'm glad I don't have to be in these things for another week. And basically what it was, they're Salewa Raven 3s. They're a great boot for like lower 48. They're stiff. They're synthetic. I think their downside is the material on the side is almost like a Cordura type. So it's not smooth. It has texture. And the rocks, I've never been in rocks quite like that before. And it just like ate up the sides of them. Like the soles were good. Everything else on them was good, but they were just, that material was fraying on the outside. And then it was opening up like the Gore-Tex underneath of it.
And it's not like you're unaccustomed to hunting mountainous country that's rocky. Like I know you've hunted Mexico, Idaho, Wyoming for sheep. You've hunted Canada and mountain goat hunted. Mountain goat hunted Kodiak together. That was super rocky, but just a different situation.
Yeah, I wanted for whatever reason, I just wanted to run a synthetic boot just to cut some weight, be lighter, just more breathable. Supposed to be a really hot hunt.
Yeah.
Really. And we were going to be doing like a lot of climbing, and I just did not want to get in a situation where my feet were going to sweat. And just my experience with leather boots up to that was they just like stretch and shrink, and I don't know. I was just on my, early season boot kick, and that's usually what I use. And yeah, towards the end, they never, I don't think they ever lost their waterproofness through that.
Yeah.
Because it didn't rub through the Gore-Tex, but there was definitely like abrasion issues.
How many pairs of socks did you bring?
I brought pretty much one for each. I think I brought 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a lot for a sheep hunt. A lot of guys go with less.
Yeah, a lot of guys go with less. But I really wanted to be diligent on my feet.
Yep.
And yeah, I talked to a dude that lived up there that's hunted sheep for a really long time. And he's like, I'll skimp on some things, but socks aren't one of those. Yeah. And I kind of just went with him.
I'm in the same camp. And I hear from the sheep guys, even Alaska sheep guys, that, they want to get 3 days out of a pair. I'm like, man, I don't. Like, I will if I have to, but that's weight that I'm willing to kind of splurge on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I would go like a day, and then when I would go to bed, I would swap them. So I had dry socks on when I went to bed, and then I would wear those the next day. And I might flip those back and forth for like the 2 days, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then roll on to like 2 brand new pairs.
Yeah.
And that seemed to work pretty good.
Gotcha. I do have a couple other gear questions before we kind of close in on this thing, but trekking poles?
Yeah. So I used the S&S Archery trekking poles. They're I think they just call them their Hunter Carbons. They're great for what I was doing.
Pack?
A Kafaru. I was running the duplex light frame with the Dall bag.
Okay.
I felt like I had to.
Yeah. Sure.
Dall bag on the Dall hunt.
Yeah, why not?
Happy
with the choice?
Yeah, for sure.
Any other pieces of gear that you feel like were like stellar performers or underperformers?
Tarp. I would definitely bring a tarp.
Yeah.
Every day of my life.
Seriously, such a clutch piece of gear to be able to set that thing up and glass from underneath of it in bad weather.
Yeah, underestimated for sure. One thing I took too that was pretty nice, it was a little bit of like, even though I was running the Hilleberg that has, it's floored tent, so you get a little bit of protection there. I ran they call it a Bora bivy. It's like $100 bivy. It's like 9 ounces. Folds up to the size of your fist. And that gave a little extra protection to my sleeping pad. And that's the other thing too with the sleeping pad. I did some redundancy on that. So, but yeah, that Bora bivy is nice because then it keeps your sleeping pad, and then your bag, and anything else that you want. It just keeps everything all together.
Yeah,
gives you a little extra. And for 9 ounces, I was like, yeah, I think that's a good choice. So I'm glad I did that. But with the redundancy on the pad, I brought a regular insulated air pad. I took the Big Agnes Q-Core But usually I take like a foam thermarest pad that's just the size of a glass. It's literally a glassing seat. I think they call it the Z seat. But what I did this time is I bought like a full length Z pad and I cut it down to 3/4 length.
Okay.
To put underneath my sleeping pad for give you more insulation from the ground and then help protect it too.
Yeah.
And then if I lost my sleeping pad, like if I got a big hole in it and it was not repairable, then at least I would have something to insulate me from the ground. That was pretty clutch on a hunt like that too, I think.
Sean's Q-core popped when we were doing a snowmobile coyote hunt in January on like 5 feet of snow.
What color was it?
I can't remember, but I've been wanting to get a Q-core, and he pulled it out, and I was like, "Hey, do you like that thing?" He's like, "Oh man, I love it. It's awesome." I was like, "I just don't know about those inflatables because mine pop all the time." He's like, "Yeah, I haven't had any issues," and then he blew it up and laid down, and it's like, "Oh, dude, you're in for a cold night, son. That sucks."
Miserable.
But it can happen to any of them.
Oh yeah. So I definitely wanted to avoid that.
Yeah. Good
so,
call.
Yeah, that was one that I wouldn't bring on like a lot of Western hunts because a lot of Western hunts you can just walk back in a few hours.
Yep.
Or a couple hours or whatever. It's just not quite as extreme as up there.
And even if you walked off the mountain and the weather conditions you had, it's not like somebody can fly in through that and bring you more kit.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, you're stuck pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. There's some other gear stuff that we can't talk about yet. What optic were you using?
I had the Whiskey 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to save some ounces?
Yeah, trying to save some ounces, and then I just like to dial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in really wet weather and whatever, I was like,
sure.
I want to try to cut down on electronics as much as I can.
I mean, like over the Tango.
Yeah, for sure over the Tango. Like, yeah, just cutting ounces.
Yep.
And size too.
Yep.
Kind of the whole thing.
But. Glassing?
Yeah, I took my that's one thing on a sheep hunt that a lot of outfitters will tell you, or guides, they'll be like, I'm bringing a spotting scope, like don't bring one. Or they leave it up to you at least. And I didn't, we were filming it too, so I wanted to have something that we could film through. And I don't know, I didn't want to have the guide to have the spotting scope all the time, because at some point they do have to take it over. Like they have to just, for a long time, study them and just make sure that you're gonna break full curl. So there's at some points where they're gonna take it over, and I didn't really want that. And I guess I was just feeling spry too. I don't know. So I took the Oscar 8, and then I took my Outdoorsman's compact tripod with a pan head, and then I had my bino adapter for my binoculars.
Okay.
Which was good. Yep.
Cool.
And I took the Kilo 3000s from SIG.
Okay. So you had some fairly hefty optics there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your total pack weight, do you think?
I didn't weigh it before I went in. I bet it was like, with food, I took my own snacks. The the packer carried a lot of the food.
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of food, I guess. But I was probably knocking on 60, I bet.
It's a lot.
55.
That's a lot of weight.
Yeah, it was.
Did you feel like you were physically prepared for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I definitely don't think that, at least that sheep hunt, it wasn't like the endurance of going fast, like keeping a fast pace that you needed to work on. It was more like being able to handle a 50, 60 pound pack on super uneven rocks that are moving all the time.
Yep.
And being very slow and controlled with it. Like, that's what I think core and legs was like pretty damn important on that.
So now we're kind of at the point that we had talked about earlier where you're starting to wonder if this is going to happen or not.
It was Wednesday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was Wednesday, and we were a long ways from the airstrip. So Wednesday morning, we wake up on top of the peak, and it was socked in for a while, and it had snowed like, I don't know, a couple inches. But when you look at snow on those rocks, it's not really that appealing. So it cleared up probably like 11 o'clock noon, something like that. it cleared up, and I had gone out to look into we were finally at the very top of like the head of the drainage that the original sheep were in. And so I got out of the tent, went over and was looking off of that. And I looked over a couple ridges over, and there was a sheep butt that went through a little saddle over the hill. So I went back and told those guys, and we pulled camp and started making our way over there. It was just really slow going, but we got over to where the sheep were, and we glassed up probably like 4 little rams. There might have been 5 really little rams underneath of us. And we gave them some time, but just couldn't find anything big. So we, looking over into kind of on the other side of that drainage, since there was new snow, there was like fresh tracks. You could see tracks easy, which was nice. And they had cut across, like wrapped around this peak. And so we're like, we should just follow those into the next drainage over. So that's what we did. We followed them. And we got into this, there was like a big rock formation. And we dropped our packs, and we were sitting under like these overhangs, and it started to rain again. And across the valley, so like through the brush line, and then on the other side of the valley, there were 4 rams, and one of them had a lot of mass, like down here at the bottom of their curl. And Wes is like, I think they're probably legal. Like they're, from what I can tell, he's probably legal. Like unless something's really weird, like he's probably legal. And from where we were a long ways away from him. And we just had snow kept coming in, and then a bunch of snow came in and blocked us, and we couldn't see him, and it was like snowing sideways. And that was another point for me where I was just like, son of a bitch. Like, yeah.
Can't catch
it's just relentless. Yeah, I was just like, this is relentless. Like, we just get a little bit, and we start making headway, and then it just like, you get cut off. And that's when we had a conversation about like, we need to be to the airstrip by Friday, so the very latest we can leave this ridge is like Thursday night, and then we're walking all night to get to the strip. And so the clouds finally started to lift and things started to break, and we were looking at the sheep, and they were in the same spot, and our guide was like, okay, I don't know if we can get to them fast enough. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a legal ram in there, but I don't know if we can get to them and get them shot and back to the airstrip in the same, like, I don't know if we can pull it off, but maybe. He said, so we either try that, or we're in sheep country. We just like keep working our way up this main ridge and peeking over both sides and just hope that we find a sheep. And I told him, I was like, man, I don't really want to just know where some rams are and know that we can probably make it and then just sit here and hope that one pops up that we've never even seen. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I've had enough sleep this week for a couple of months. So like, if you want to go for it, we'll go for it. And I was like, yeah, let's go. So we packed our packs up, and it was 5:00 that evening. We made our way down a finger, dropped down through the brush line, crossed the creek, and went back up through the brush line, which a lot of that stuff is like, then you're in the tundra, like you're in the permafrost, and that is like, you walked in that.
Yeah, it's neat.
It's not that much fun. And so we've made
How would you describe it for the good folks out there who have not?
Like walking on a giant pillow.
Yeah.
That's like really uneven, and then there's a lot of rocks underneath of it too, and you never know if you're going to step in a hole or step on a rock, or there's that. And then after you get past a certain point of that's decent walking, then you're into the brush. So then you're into both.
And grizzlies.
Yeah, that too. I just tried not to think about that. Yeah. But it was...
Were you carrying a pistol?
Something. No. My guide was.
Jordan.
They talked me out of it.
Did they?
I flew it in with me.
Yeah.
I flew a 10 mil in.
It worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. So, anyways, yeah, so 5:00 in the evening is when we left that. And then it was Thursday morning at, I think, 2:00 in the morning. We were 1,000 yards from the sheep, and they were still bedded there.
Wow.
And we were under them.
So you just went through 9 hours of tough sledding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of just like chipping away at it.
Yeah.
And it was so funny at one time. Like that camera guy went through some real hell that he was not signed up for.
Yeah.
And that was like his first mountain trip.
Jonah Bell.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, Jonah? Look forward to meeting you someday.
Yeah, you will at the wedding.
Cool.
Yeah. So Jonah and I, we endured a lot of hell, and it was really good at, we kept each other upbeat, I think.
That's awesome.
That was a lot of it. It was just the people that you were with, you know, staying positive. So yeah, we were 1,000 yards from them, and we didn't think it was a good idea. It had cleared off. And so then, you know, the first night after clearing off from a storm, it's just like awfully, awfully cold.
Yeah.
And miserable. So we were on a pretty steep hillside. There was no place to pitch a tent. So we just pulled our sleeping bags out and crawled in them and just tried to sleep on the hillside. And so we were there till probably 4:30, I think, is when we woke up, and it started to get light, and we watched the sheep get up, and they went over to this little rock outcropping. There was a little fold in the hill behind them, and they were dropping in and out of that. And we finally decided that we got to make a move. So
have you determined at this point that there is a legal ram?
Yeah, there's two. Yeah, there's two, and one of them I really like a flare.
Yep.
One of them flared out a lot and was heavy, and the other one didn't flare out quite as much, but he like really made a full curl and started coming back, but he didn't really have a flare. So we're like, there's two legal rams, and we're looking at them, and they're kind of dirty in different places. Like their hides just look a little different. You know, white just gets dirty easy. So I'm looking through the spotting scope, and Wes is saying to me like, okay, there's one laying to the left. He has his head facing left. He has a big dirty spot on his right rump. He's like, you see how he is kind of shaped and all these things. So then when we get to the sheep, we can communicate back and forth, and I kind of half-fast know what I'm looking at, which is super important. So we decide to drop back behind the little fold in our hill and get up on their same level, and then just try to walk straight at them, like across to them, and hopefully we can get to the rock outcropping that they were on. And so we headed over there, and we finally got to this big rock slab that had a crack, like a giant crack in it. And we get pretty close to it. Wes peeks his head through, and he didn't really have any, he didn't say anything at first, and I was like, how hard could the sheep be to see? Like, they're gone. Like, they snuck out on us. And then he turns around, he's like, come on. He's like 100 yards. I was like, holy shit, they're close. And so when I got up in this little crack, put my bipod on a rock, and he was like, there was the four rams. They didn't really, I think they knew something was there, but they didn't really like know what it was. So they turned and were walking directly away from us. And the guy just kept calling out, like, kept calling ranges, and then he was trying to figure out which one was the best one. And it was a pretty obvious difference between the sublegal rams and the legal ones.
Right.
So I was on the first one, and he's like, no, the one that you like is in the back. So I was on him, and they just kept like, they just wouldn't give me a shot. Like, all I had, I like could see where their butts. And Wes just kept, he was like 150, 170, 180, 200, 225, 230. And I'm just, the little fold that they're in is like 300 yards wide. Like, it wasn't going to take that much for him to just like roll over and be gone. And finally he was like, he called 240 as range, and that ram stopped and was just a little bit quartering away. And I stuck it like right in the last rib and let her rip. And yeah, so it hit him there. And then I was holding in my scope for the range instead of dialing.
Yep.
And when I went to reload, he was broadside, and I was just going to shoot him again, and I didn't hold.
Yeah.
And so I hit right underneath of his brisket. So I reloaded, and he was like on his way down, but I was like, I'm going to keep shooting until it's like dead. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't hold. And so I actually ended up dialing in on the last shot and shot him, and then we had dead sheep. It's a very strange feeling.
What time of day is this?
Like 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe.
And how long do you have to make it to the airstrip?
7 o'clock the next morning.
Okay.
Yeah. But what we did was when the sheep started to move, we were all like fairly, I think the packer especially was like frozen to death the next morning. Like, we luckily had we had a little hill behind us that sheltered us, sight-wise from the sheep. And like we were running, our guide was running up and down it, trying to get warm so he could sit behind the spotting scope. And Jonah went and was running up, and yeah, it was just, everybody was super cold. So instead of, we just left our packs, and we left the packer at the packs. And then it was just us three that went up. So we had to come back and get our packs and then go back up to where the sheep was and took care of him and did all that. And then when we got him all taken care of, we went back down to where we had originally like stayed the night and dropped the packs, loaded up all of our camp, and the rest of our stuff was trying to divvy it out as best we could between everybody to where it would be like kind of fair, and loaded up the packs and took off. I think we left at 7 that night.
Okay.
Yeah. And we got to the airstrip at 4:30 in the morning, I think.
And slept for a couple hours and flew home with your sheep.
Yeah. And it was a miserable night of walking. We had to jump we had to go through 2 streams. Probably lucky none of us fell in. And then everything else was just, we were in the brush line for 80% of it.
Gross.
85% of it probably. And it was just like busting through trees some of the time, and you're on the permafrost. And yeah, there towards the end especially, it was a pretty steep climb to get up to where it broke out into the airstrip, and we would take, like, Wes was taking, I think, like 50 or 60 steps. He was counting them, and then we would all sit down.
Yeah.
But we were getting to the point, I remember one of the last times I stood up, I was like, dude, if we sit down, like, I'm not standing back up. Like, I don't think I can. And, we made it to the airstrip and pitched the tent, and the airplane came to pick us up the next day.
Do you feel like you have the sheep bug more or less now?
More, for sure.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That didn't make any sense.
Kind of a sick, twisted way of fun. Oh, for sure.
It's a beautiful mount. Beautiful mount.
Oh, yeah, they really kicked ass on that. Yeah, Hunter's Choice in Nampa.
Yeah.
Did that for me.
So you had a terrific experience, great meat, and you have a wonderful mount for it. Biggest takeaway, single biggest takeaway, learning point.
Ooh. Learning point. I'm not sure if there's like a specific thing, but I would say having to go through all the hell made it that much better. And I think that a takeaway was like, don't be afraid of the hell that could be endured.
Yeah.
Going into it, if that makes any sense. Like sometimes it's good to push yourself out of, push your boundaries or whatever it might mean more to you in the end. Like if we would have shot the sheep on the first morning in that saddle, it would have been awesome, and I would have got a Dall sheep. But it wouldn't have been what it was, staying with those guys for 8 days or whatever and doing that crazy stalk.
You're tough.
And pack out.
You're a tough human.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of dumb in there too, probably. Just kidding. Yeah, I mean, there was really no, what are you going to do? Like,
give up?
Yeah,
That's what most people would have done.
You could be laying in the tent and be like, I quit, I give up, but we're still here, and I still have to walk my ass out of here, and the plane still can't come, so. Yeah. There was just, I mean, we're allotted X amount of days, like, might as well fulfill them, so.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks for your story. That's
for
a
sure.
good story.
Sorry it probably bored everybody, but.
I don't think so.
There was a lot of elements to it that you can't miss.
Yeah. And since a lot of people gloss over that stuff, There's folks out there that don't know what they might be getting into.
Yeah.
So I think that there's people listening right now that now want to Dall sheep hunt more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also people that thought they wanted to, that are now thinking, you know what? Not for me. I'm maybe in that second camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that's the hunt for me. If I'm being real honest with myself, could I do it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm physically and mentally capable of that, but I don't know if that's the kind of hunt that I would find fulfilling and satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, there were times, looking back on it, it was fun, and I really want to go again, and it fueled the fire, but there was a lot of times in there where I was like, like, hell no, there's, Leah was back at a bachelor party having fun on a freaking yacht drinking Coors Lights, and I was just like, I have literally been staring at the ceiling of my tent for 4 days now.
Yeah.
And the wind is just like, rattling my tent apart. There are definitely times where you feel like it sucks and you're like, this is not where I want to be right now. But also.
Wow. Where can people go to look at a picture of this ram?
Probably my Instagram, at Jordan.bud on Instagram.
Okay. Link in podcast description, as always.
Sweet.
Okay. Thank you, Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And huge thank you for letting us come back out here and hunt. We had a hell of a coyote hunt last night. Save that story for another time.
Yeah.
That was one of the most memorable coyote stands in my life.
It was wild.
Super wild.
It was wild.
Can't believe that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Story for another time.
Yeah. But,
all right.
Yeah.
Catch you next time.
Yeah.
So I found this old ad, and there's like dudes dressed up like construction workers, and a guy's got a jackhammer, and there's a crane, and they're moving all these big steel beams and stuff.
Aladdin Stanley Thermos. Stanley, the tough, all steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable.
They're showing this thermos like falling off this building and hitting all this other construction stuff.
And built to take a bounding year after year. Get the tough one.
Well, it lands in a wheelbarrow. The guy grabs it out of the wheelbarrow. Now he's going to pour himself a cup of coffee. I love these cheesy old ads. And most of the time, like, they're lying to us, right? That's most of what marketing used to be, was just like telling a lie, or at least telling a version of a lie that made you think that you needed this thing. But I'll tell you what, when it's cold out like it is right now, the only way to keep liquid and not freezing in your pack is by putting it in something that's insulated. So packing a thermos in the wintertime is really smart, whether it's for a hot beverage like coffee, or if you just want to bring some water with you, which is a really important thing if you're going to be out adventuring around in this snow that we've got all over the country. And I think you should be, because it's a great time of year to get out and about. This is both a comfort and a safety thing. If you want to get something from Stanley, which I encourage you to do, you can use the discount code 6RANCH. That's the number 6 in the word ranch, and that'll get you 25% off of just about anything on their website. I encourage you to do that. They're great supporters of the show, and great supporters of this audience, and I love you guys. So stay warm out there, have a nice warm drink, and make sure you're drinking it out of a Stanley product. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6Ranch Podcast, or me at 6Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.